if you study the history of Vietnam, one of the things you'll find is that during the Johnson administration, late Kennedy administration, into the Johnson administration, is the North Vietnamese were making incursions into the South, we would respond proportionally and incrementally. And that sent a signal to the communists that we really didn't want to fight. And in fact, we very publicly would say, we're not looking to escalate. We're not looking for a war. And so that inspired them to start a war because they knew we did not have the resolve. It is eerily similar to what's going on now in the Middle East. This is from CBS News. U.S. officials have confirmed to CBS News that plans have been approved for a series of strikes over a number of days against targets, including Iranian personnel and facilities, inside Iraq and Syria. The strikes will come in response to drone and rocket attacks targeting U.S. forces in the region, including the drone attack on Sunday that killed 3 U.S. service members at the Tower 22 base inside Jordan near the Syrian border. Speaking at the Pentagon Thursday, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin told reporters that the U.S. won't tolerate attacks on American troops, except we have been. Been about 100 since October 7th. But there's something more ridiculous here you should probably be able to put your finger on. Why is the American military and this administration telling CBS News how we intend to respond so that CBS News can then broadcast it to the world, so then Iran can hear that we intend to target Iranian personnel and facilities inside Iraq and Syria, to give them time to batten down the hatches? This is insanity. This is absolutely amateur hour. We were told the adults were back in charge. These are children. Actually, these aren't even children. These are clowns. Weather will be a major factor in the timing of the strikes, the U.S. officials told CBS News, as the U.S. has the capability to carry out strikes in bad weather, but prefers to have better visibility of selected targets as a safeguard against inadvertently hitting civilians who might stray into the area at the last moment. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but it does rain in the Middle East. It rains and it gets cold. In fact, there's actually a chance of rain in Baghdad today. It's declining as the day goes on into the night there. It is 8 p.m. there right now as I'm talking. It's now cloudy. They've had some rain. It's going to be sunny over the next day or so. Just bizarre that we would telegraph this. The 10-day weather forecast for Baghdad is after the rain has moved through, there were early showers, and there's going to be very slight chance of rain, but there will be clouds. Lows in the low 40s, highs in the upper 60s. So when I was a kid, it would living over there, this is the rainy season. January, February, and into March, it rains, and then it all goes away for the rest of the year, by and large. And so we're telegraphing several things to the international community. One, that if it's really cloudy, we're not going to strike. And two, when the clouds go away, we are going to strike, and we're going to strike Iranian personnel and supplies, and we're going to do it in Iraq and Syria, not Iran. We're not going after the Houthi or anywhere else. So you know what you can do, Iran? You can move your personnel out now. They're playing chess. We're playing checkers. This is ludicrous. It's irresponsible as well. The Houthi yesterday fired missiles at an American warship, and all of the defense systems on the warship failed except the final Gatling gun, which thankfully saved the ship. The missile was about a mile away or just seconds from impact. So if you look at an American warship at the top, it's always been so cool to see. They have this thing. It looks like R2-D2. It's this white thing at the top, and it's got a Gatling gun that sticks out of it. And it fires massive rounds at incoming missiles. You can overwhelm the system if obviously there are a lot of missiles coming. It can only shoot so many. But there are other defensive systems for the warships as well. There are electronic systems. There are return fire systems they can fire when they target the missiles to hit the missiles. The final line of defense is this R2-D2-like Gatling gun that sits at the top and fires the machine gun, the Gatling gun essentially, of huge rounds to blow up the missiles. And thankfully it was successful, or it would have impacted the ship. Here's what's going on, though, is the Houthi firing their missiles and rockets at American warships are relaying back to the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians our actual capabilities. They are field testing maneuvers that China, Russia, and Iran can use directly. They're using the Houthi to keep their hands and fingerprints off of it so that they can then test our resolve and our weapons systems and our weapons defense systems on our naval vessels. If we obliterated them, they wouldn't be able to do that, and it would signal our resolve. But Joe Biden doesn't want to do that. He's telegraphing his weakness. And this, I think, is really important and something that everybody needs to understand here. Joe Biden is not telegraphing America's weakness. Joe Biden is telegraphing Joe Biden's weakness. Joe Biden is not telegraphing the weakness of the American military. Joe Biden is telegraphing the weakness of the American military leadership. We have the best trained fighting force on the planet. The Chinese have not been militarily tested in more than a generation. We are battle tested and battle hardened. We have weapon systems that have proven themselves in war. The Chinese haven't. Everything about China's military is theoretical. And you do need to understand that for all the fear of the Chinese military, their aircraft carrier caught on fire, split in half, their major new destroyers burn up off the coast of China for everybody to see. Turns out they've been filling their nuclear missiles with water instead of fuel to launch them. There's a lot of corruption. President Xi is trying to weed out that corruption, waste, fraud, abuse, graft, greed, corruption. He's trying to get rid of it to build up a fighting force. It's very hard in communist countries to do that because the whistleblowers tend to die. We have a battle-hardened, battle-tested military with weapon systems that we know work that are being tested in Ukraine, among other places. That's another reason we should keep funding Ukraine. It's not that we don't have the capacity or the weapon systems. It's that we're testing them in Ukraine against the Russians, which were supposed to be the second best army on the planet, and now we see they're not. Our weapons manufacturers, though, have gotten lazy and greedy and sclerotic. They've atrophied in resources. Look at Boeing. Boeing, commercial and military, it's not doing well. Our weapons manufacturers are actually telling the American military, we can't do that for you. Our American military-industrial complex is starting to tell the Pentagon no. There are a lot of conspiracy theorists. It's not just the Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift conspiracy theorists. The same people who believe the Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift conspiracy theory are convinced that the American military-industrial complex wants perpetual war because, oh my God, Dwight Eisenhower said something sometime in the past. They actually don't because they don't have the capacity right now. They don't. They're telling the Pentagon no. And again, we have reserves. That's why I'm okay sending stuff to Ukraine. We have great reserves still. But right now, we have a runway in this country to resupply and add efficiencies to our military-industrial complex that we actually need for what is inevitably coming. And this administration doesn't want to fix the supply chain issues. It doesn't want to build efficiencies into the system. It doesn't want to expand the contractors. God forbid they enrich a defense contractor who might keep us safe and build weapons to keep us safe. You know, there are new companies coming out there. A buddy of mine who's in this business and works with the military. He put on my radar. It's a new company. It's in Atlanta, Anduril. It's impressive. So they're making drones that are weaponized drones that can be launched as a swarm, and the ones that are not blown up come back to base so you can use them again. It's an impressive, efficient weapons system. And they're competing for space with the big dogs, the Northrop Grumman's, the Lockheeds, the Boeings, the Raytheons, and others. And of course, the big ones want to shut out the small ones. They want to shut out the innovators. We've got time to fix this stuff, but it doesn't help when we have an administration that wants to telegraph its weaknesses to the world. By telegraphing to the Iranians that an attack is coming in these locations against these types of things, it gives the Iranians time to move their hardware, move their personnel, reinforce their defense systems before we actually attack. And this is what led us into Vietnam. The Iranians know Joe Biden's history. Joe Biden likes to tuck tail and retreat. He wanted out of Vietnam. The moment he got in Congress, he started calling for it. He wanted out of Lebanon after the Marine barracks bombing. He wanted out of Iraq. He wanted out of Afghanistan. He got it out of Afghanistan. Joe Biden does not have the intestinal fortitude or testicular fortitude to actually fight a fight. Joe Biden is all talk, but he lacks the testicular fortitude to actually lead the American military on the world stage in defense of American sovereignty and for our allies. Joe Biden wants to tickle the enemy. He doesn't want to punch the enemy. He can talk a good game about corn pop, but when it actually comes to developing a robust defense capacity that punches Iran hard so they don't dare punch back, Joe Biden refuses to do it. At the end of the day, he's a moral coward and pacifist who does not want to lead America on the world stage. He wants to retreat us from the world stage because Joe Biden and the nonprofit progressive academics in his administration believe the world is worse off with a strong America. 8 days before October 7th, Jake Sullivan, his national security advisor, bragged on the world stage about how the Middle East was more stable than it has been in decades. 8 days later, Hamas was chopping off the heads of Israelis, and the American military couldn't figure out what to do because its defense secretary had disappeared, and Joe Biden himself was derelict from duty because the man does not want to throw a punch. He only wants to talk about when he was a kid throwing punches. And now, at the end of the day, the American military, thanks to Joe Biden's leadership and Lloyd Gates, who couldn't bother to tell anyone he was off the job, wants to make sure the Iranians are off the job when our missiles fly so we can keep escalating. Because in their minds, the continued escalation will lead to us not being in war. When history shows it's the very thing that gets us into big wars and gets a lot of Americans killed. 3 American military personnel from Georgia are dead because of this administration's weak handling of Iran, and their response is more weak handling of Iran. How many other American military personnel must be killed before this administration decides it must actually throw the punch to get Iran to realize we mean business? Right now, they're just tickling them.